The ship came out of deep space like a wounded animal. It was small, old, and covered in burn marks. The metal was black in some places where fire had touched it. The engines made a sick sound as it moved slowly toward the station. Orbital Station Keth 7 was a busy place. Ships came and went every hour. Traders sold goods from 100 different worlds. Travelers stopped to rest before continuing their long trips across the galaxy. The station was home to many different species, all living together in a kind of peace. Commander Lyra stood at the main viewing window and watched the damaged ship approach. She was Velanti, a species known for their 4 arms and blue-gray skin. Her eyes were large and dark, and they missed nothing. She had commanded this station for 12 years, and she had seen many things. But something about this ship made her feel uneasy. What do we know about it? She asked. Her second officer, Torek, checked his data screen. He was young and nervous, always worried about something. It is a human vessel, Commander. Registry shows it was built on Earth about 30 years ago. 1 life sign on board. Lyra felt her jaw tighten. Humans. She had heard many stories about them. Everyone in the galaxy had heard stories about them. They were a young species, but they had spread quickly across the stars. They built colonies. They made allies. And when they needed to, they made war. The expansion wars had ended 5 years ago, but the memory was still fresh. Entire worlds had burned. Millions had died. The humans had won, of course. They always seemed to win. But victory had come at a terrible cost for everyone. Should we deny docking permission? Torek asked. Hopefully. Lyra thought about it. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to tell the human to go away and find another station. But the law was clear. Any ship that paid the docking fee and followed the rules had the right to stay. No, she said finally. Let him dock. But I will meet him personally. The ship landed in Docking Bay 7. It looked even worse up close. The hull was covered in scratches and dents. One of the engine housings was cracked. Whoever owned this ship had been through many hard times. Lyra waited with 6 of her security officers. They carried weapons, but kept them lowered. There was no need for violence yet. But she wanted the human to know that she was ready for trouble. The ship's door opened with a hiss of escaping air. For a moment, there was only darkness inside. Then a figure stepped out into the light. Lyra had expected many things. She had expected a soldier, perhaps, or a criminal running from justice. What she saw was something else entirely. The human was covered from head to toe in armor. It was black, heavy, and clearly built for combat. The surface was marked with old burns and deep scratches. Some of the scratches looked like claw marks. Others looked like they came from energy weapons. This armor had seen many battles. The human walked slowly down the ramp. His movements were smooth and quiet, despite the weight of the metal he wore. Servos hummed softly with each step. His helmet covered his entire face, showing only a dark visor that reflected the lights of the docking bay. He stopped in front of Lyra and stood very still. "I am David Kim," he said. His voice came through speakers in the helmet, flat and mechanical. "I request temporary harbor. 3 cycles. No more." Lyra studied him carefully. She could see nothing of the man inside the armor. She could not read his expression or guess his thoughts. All she saw was metal and darkness. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Rest," David said simply. "Repairs to my ship. Then I will leave." "Where are you going?" "Nowhere in particular." Lyra did not like this answer. People who traveled to nowhere were usually running from something. And people who wore combat armor all the time were usually dangerous. Torek leaned close to her ear. "Commander," he whispered, "humans are known to be unpredictable. Their history is full of violence. Perhaps we should ask him to leave." Lyra raised one of her hands to silence him. She took a step closer to the armored figure. "I know what your kind has done," she said, her voice cold and hard. "I know about the Morrow Expanse. I know about Kelix Prime. I know about all the worlds that burned because of human ambition." David said nothing. "We do not welcome war criminals on this station," Lyra continued. "We do not welcome those who bring death wherever they go." Still, David remained silent. This made Lyra angry. She wanted a reaction. She wanted him to defend himself, to argue, to show some sign of the violence she knew was hiding inside that metal shell. "You wear that armor because you are afraid," she said, her voice rising. "Underneath all that metal, you are nothing. You humans are soft and weak. You pretend to be strong, but you are just parasites. You take and destroy and call it progress." The security officers shifted nervously. No one spoke this way to humans. Everyone knew how dangerous they could be when provoked, but David Kim did not attack. He did not shout or threaten. He simply stood there, silent as stone. Then, slowly, he lifted his hands to his helmet. Lyra tensed. Her officers raised their weapons, but David was not reaching for a weapon. He was reaching for the clasps that held his helmet in place. There was a soft click, then a hiss of releasing pressure. The helmet came loose. David lifted it off his head and held it at his side. Lyra stared at the face. Beneath, she had expected a monster. She had expected cold eyes and cruel features. She had expected the face of a killer. Instead, she saw a man. Just a man. He looked old for a human, perhaps 40 or 50 years. His face was lined and tired. A thick scar ran from his left temple down to his jaw, pink and old. His dark hair was short and turning gray. But it was his eyes that caught her attention most of all. They were not angry. They were not threatening. They were sad. Deeply, terribly sad. Without a word, David began to remove the rest of his armor. The chest plate came first, then the arm guards, then the leg plates. Piece by piece, he set the heavy metal down on the deck at Lyra's feet. When he was finished, he stood before her in nothing but a thin gray undersuit. He looked smaller now, older, more human. "You were right," he said quietly. "Underneath, I am just soft, just weak." Then he turned and walked back toward his ship, leaving his armor behind. Lyra watched him go, and for the first time in many years, she did not know what to say. The armor sat in the middle of the docking bay like a dead thing. The black metal caught the light and held it. No one wanted to touch it. No one wanted to go near it. Lyra stood at the observation window above the bay and looked down at it. She had not moved for almost an hour. Her officers had asked her questions, brought her reports, tried to get her attention. She had waved them all away. She could not stop thinking about the human's eyes in her life. Lyra had seen many kinds of eyes. She had seen the greedy eyes of traitors. She had seen the frightened eyes of refugees. She had seen the cold eyes of killers. But she had never seen eyes like David Kim's. Those eyes held something she could not name. It was not fear, though fear was part of it. It was not anger, though she sensed anger buried deep. It was something heavier, something that pressed down on the soul like a great weight. "Commander?" Lyra turned. Torek stood behind her, his scales pale with nervousness. "What is it?" she asked. "The human. He has not left his ship. He has not eaten. He has not even moved from the entrance ramp." Torek paused. "Some of the traders are asking questions. They want to know why there is human armor in the middle of the bay. Tell them it is station business." "But Commander, tell them." Lyra's voice was sharp. Torek flinched and hurried away. Alone again, Lyra returned to the window. Below, she could see the human ship. The ramp was still down, and there, Sitting on the deck beside it was David Kim. He had not gone inside. He sat with his back against the ship's hull, his legs stretched out in front of him. His thin gray undersuit made him look small and fragile. The scars on his face and arms were visible even from this distance. "What are you?" Lyra wondered. What happened to you? She had hated humans for so long. The expansion wars had taken much from her people. Her own brother had died at Kellick's Prime, burned alive when human ships bombed the colony. She had carried that hatred like a stone in her chest for 5 years. But looking at David Kim now, she felt something strange. The hatred was still there, but it had cracks in it. Something else was growing through those cracks. Something that felt almost like curiosity. She made a decision. Lyra left the observation deck and walked down to the docking bay. The other species on the station moved out of her way. They always did. She was the commander, and everyone knew that her word was law on KETH-7. She found David exactly where she had seen him from above. He did not look up as she approached. He was holding something in his hands, turning it over and over. A small piece of paper with an image on it. "You have not moved," Lyra said. "No," David agreed. His voice was quiet, tired. "You need to eat, probably." Lyra looked at the ration pack sitting untouched beside him. It was still sealed. She reached down, picked it up, and opened it. The smell of processed food filled the air. "Eat," she said, holding it out to him. David looked up at her. His eyes held that same heavy sadness, but there was also surprise in them. He had not expected kindness from her. Slowly, he reached out and took the ration pack. He took a small bite, chewed, swallowed. It seemed to take great effort. Lyra sat down on the deck beside him. She did not know why she did this. It went against everything she believed. But something in her needed to understand this broken man. "The photograph," she said, nodding at the paper in his other hand. "What is it?" David was silent for a long moment. Then he tilted the image so she could see Dot. It showed a woman with dark hair and warm eyes. She was smiling at the camera. In her arms was a baby, tiny and sleeping. Behind them was a small house with green plants growing along the front. "My wife," David said. "Her name is Amy, and my son, Daniel." He was 3 months old when this was taken. Lyra studied the image. The woman looked happy. The baby looked peaceful. It was a picture of love and home and safety. "Where are they now?" she asked. David's hand trembled slightly. He pulled the photograph back and looked at it himself. "Earth," he said. "At least, I think so. I have not spoken to them in 4 years. Why?" The question hung in the air between them. David did not answer right away. He ate another bite of food, slow and mechanical. He seemed to be gathering his thoughts, or perhaps gathering his courage. "I did something terrible," he finally said. "During the war, I followed orders that I knew were wrong. And because of that, many innocent people died." Lyra felt her body tense. This was what she had expected. This was the violence she had sensed hiding beneath the armor. "How many?" she asked. 16,000. David's voice was hollow. "There was a valley on a world called Cellar. Our intelligence said it was an enemy base. Command ordered a full strike. I requested more time to confirm the target. I was told the attack could not wait." He paused, and his face twisted with old pain. "I could have refused. I should have refused. But I told myself that orders were orders. I told myself that the people above me knew better than I did. So the first gave the command." Lyra watched him carefully. She could see the memory playing out behind his eyes. "The valley was not a military base," David continued. "It was a refugee camp. Families. Children. There was a school in an underground shelter. We thought it was a bunker for soldiers." His voice cracked. "It was not," For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the station seemed far away. Other ships landed and departed. Traders called out their goods. Life went on around them. But here, in this small space, time had stopped. After that, David said, I could not look at myself. I could not look at my wife. Every time I saw my reflection, I saw the faces of those children. Every time Amy tried to touch me, I flinched away. I was afraid that my hands would burn her. He looked down at his hands. They were rough, scarred, calloused from years of hard work and harder fighting. I left before Daniel could learn to walk. I told myself it was to protect them, to keep them safe from the monster I had become. A bitter smile crossed his face. But really, I was just running away. I have been running ever since. Lyra thought about her brother. She thought about the hatred she had carried for so long. She thought about all the humans she had cursed and blamed and wished dead, and she realized something that surprised her deeply. David Kim was not so different from her. He carried his dead with him, just as she carried hers. He was haunted by the past, just as she was. The only difference was that his ghosts came from his own actions, while hers came from someone else's. But was that really a difference at all? Why do you still have the photograph? She asked quietly. David looked at the image again. His thumb traced the edge, gentle as a whisper. To remind myself, he said, that somewhere in the galaxy there is a boy who might still forgive me, and a woman who might still remember the man I used to be. He tucked the photograph back into his pocket. Probably not, he added softly. But maybe. Lyra sat with him in silence for a long time after that. She did not offer comfort or judgment. She simply sat with him, two broken souls sharing the weight of their pain. And somewhere deep inside her, the stone of hatred began to crack a little more. She lay in her quarters, staring at the ceiling. The station hummed softly around her, the sound of machines and life support systems doing their endless work. Normally, this sound helped her rest. Tonight, it only reminded her that she was awake. She kept seeing David's face. Those tired eyes. That sad smile. The way his hand shook when he held the photograph. Finally, she gave up on sleep. She got out of bed and walked to her desk. Her computer screen glowed in the darkness. Show me military records, she said to the machine. Human forces. Expansion wars. Name, David Kim. The computer searched for a moment. Then the screen filled with information. Lyra read slowly, carefully. Each word was a new piece of the puzzle. Lieutenant, Colonel David Kim, born in the place called California on the planet Earth. Joined the military at age 22. Served in the 4th Human Expeditionary Force for 18 years. Decorated 12 times for bravery and leadership. She scrolled through the list of his awards. Defense of Arcas Station. Liberation of the Yemeni slave camps. The holding of Corridor 7. Each name meant something. Each name was a battle where David Kim had saved lives, but she also found the other records. The darker ones dot the burning of Cellar Valley. 16,000 civilian casualties. Investigation showed that the strike commander had requested additional time for target confirmation. Request was denied by superior officers. Strike commander followed orders despite personal objections. After the strike, Lieutenant Colonel Kim walked into his commanding officer's quarters and broke the man's jaw with one punch. Military tribunal. Dishonorable discharge. No prison time due to extenuating circumstances and record of service. Lyra leaned back in her chair. So it was true. Everything he had told her was true, but the records showed something else too. Something David had not mentioned. He had tried to stop it. He had asked for more time. He had known something was wrong, and he had tried to do the right thing. When his request was denied, he had been forced to choose between his duty and his conscience. He chose duty, and it destroyed him. Lyra thought about her own choices, the orders she had given over the years, the time she had looked the other way when traitors sold weapons to dangerous groups, the time she had followed rules that she knew were unfair, simply because they were rules. Was she so different from David Kim? She read further. After his discharge, David Kim disappeared. There were scattered reports of him in different parts of the galaxy. He never stayed in one place for long. He took jobs as a mercenary, a guard, a mechanic. He seemed to be drifting, a man with no home and no purpose. The last confirmed sighting was 3 months ago at a remote fuel station near the Outer Rim. He had paid for fuel, bought supplies, and left without speaking to anyone. And now he was here, on her station, sleeping in a damaged ship with nothing but a photograph and his guilt. Lyra closed the records and sat in the dark for a long time. The next morning, she went to find him. David was awake, sitting in the same spot as before. He had eaten the rest of the ration pack. His eyes were red, as if he had not slept either. "I read your records," Lyra said without greeting. David nodded slowly. He did not seem surprised. "You tried to stop the strike," she continued. "You asked for more time. They said no." "Yes. Then why do you blame yourself so much?" "You tried to do the right thing." David looked at her with those tired, heavy eyes. "Because trying is not enough," he said. "I still gave the order. I still pressed the button. Those people are still dead because of me. You were following orders. That is what soldiers always say." His voice was soft but firm. "I was following orders. I was just doing my job. It was not my fault." He shook his head. "But it is always someone's fault. And on that day, it was mine." Lara sat down beside him again. She was getting used to sitting on the cold deck. It felt strange, but also right somehow. "I lost my brother in the war," she said quietly. David turned to look at her. His expression did not change, but she saw something shift in his eyes. Attention, interest, perhaps even compassion. "Kellex Prime," she continued. "Human ships bombed the colony. He was trying to help refugees escape. A piece of burning metal fell on him. He died in the hospital 3 days later." "I am sorry," David said. The words were simple, but she could tell he meant them. "For 5 years, I have hated your kind," Lyra admitted. "Every human I saw, I imagined killing. I dreamed about revenge. I told myself that all humans were monsters." She looked at David's scarred face, his tired eyes, his gentle hands. "But you are not a monster," she said. "You are just a man who made a terrible mistake and cannot forgive himself for it." David was quiet for a long moment. "Does that change anything?" he finally asked. "Does my suffering undo what I did? Does my guilt bring back the dead?" "No," Lyra said honestly. "It does not." "Then what is the point?" It was a real question, not a challenge. He genuinely wanted to know. Lyra thought about it carefully before answering. "The point," she said slowly, "is that you are still here. You are still alive. You could have given up long ago. You could have ended your pain in 100 different ways. But you did not." She reached out and touched his arm. It was the first time she had willingly touched a human. His skin was warm, rough, alive. "You carry your guilt because you believe you deserve it," she said. "But maybe guilt is not the answer. Maybe the answer is to do something with the life you still have." David stared at her hand on his arm. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Like what?" he asked. "I do not know," Lyra admitted. "But staying here forever, hiding in your ship, waiting to die, that is not living. That is just dying slowly." David was silent for a long time after that. Lyra removed her hand and sat with him in the quiet of the docking bay. Around them, life continued. Ships came and went. Traders made deals. Children ran through the corridors, laughing and playing. The universe kept moving, indifferent to the pain of two broken souls. But sometimes, Laura thought, that was the most comforting thing of all. The universe did not care about their suffering, which meant they were free to let it go whenever they chose. The question was whether David Kim would ever make that choice. On the second day, he got up from his spot beside the ship. He walked across the docking bay to where his armor still lay in a pile. He stood over it for a long time, looking down at the black metal that had protected him for so many years. Then he walked away without touching it. He went to the station's repair bay and offered to work. The chief mechanic, a gruff old Talaxian named Brem, looked at him with suspicion. "You are human," Brem said. "Why do you want to work here?" "I need to do something with my hands," David replied. "And I am good with machines." Brem thought about it. He needed workers. Good workers were hard to find. And there was something about this quiet human that seemed trustworthy. "Fine," he said. "You start now. Pay is 20 credits per shift. Do not break anything." David nodded and got to work. He was good at it. Very good. His hands moved with skill and confidence. He fixed engines that others had given up on. He replaced worn parts with perfect precision. He worked quietly, never complaining, never asking for breaks. The other workers watched him at first. Some were afraid. Some were curious. But as the hours passed, they began to relax. This human was not like the soldiers they had heard stories about. He was just a man doing a job. By the end of the first shift, Brem was impressed. "You know what you are doing," he said grudgingly. "Come back tomorrow." David nodded and left without a word. Lyra heard about it from Torek that evening. "The human is working in the repair bay," Torek reported, clearly confused. "He has been there all day. Brem says he is the best mechanic he has seen in years." "Good," Lyra said simply. Torek waited for more, but she said nothing else. On the third day, something else happened. A Yemeni trader named Cass approached David in the repair bay. The Yemeni were small creatures, barely a meter tall, with bright orange fur and large eyes. During the war, many of them had been captured and sold as slaves by criminal groups. Cass stood in front of David for a long moment, studying his face. "You are David Kim," the Yemeni finally said. It was not a question. David set down his tools and looked at the small creature. "Yes," he said. "You freed my people," Cass said. "The Yemeni slave camps. You led the rescue mission." David was silent. "I was there," Cass continued. "I was 12 years old. The slavers were going to kill us all before they fled. You and your soldiers broke through the gates. You carried the children to safety yourself." David closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were wet. "I remember," he said quietly. Cass reached up and took David's hand. The Yemeni's small fingers were warm against his rough skin. "You saved my life," Cass said. "I have never forgotten. I have been looking for you for years, hoping to say thank you." A tear rolled down David's face. He did not wipe it away. "I am not a hero," he said, his voice rough. "I have done terrible things." "I know," Cass replied. "I have heard the stories. Cellar Valley and the rest. But that does not change what you did for my people. One bad thing does not erase a good thing. And one good thing does not erase a bad thing. You are both. That is what it means to be alive." David stared at the small creature. For the first time in years, something like hope flickered in his eyes. "I do not know how to live with both," he admitted. "Nobody does," Cass said with a small smile. "We all just do our best." The Yemeni released his hand and walked away. David watched him go, then turned back to his work. But his hands were shaking, and it took him a long time to steady them. That night, Lyra found David sitting on the promenade. It was late, and most of the station was asleep. The great windows showed the stars outside. Thousands of points of light in the endless darkness. She sat down beside him without speaking. They sat together in silence for a while, watching the stars. "The Yemeni told me what happened today," Lyra finally said. David nodded slowly. "Cass, he was just a child when we found him. So small, so afraid. I carried him on my shoulders for 3 kilometers because he was too tired to walk. You saved many lives that day. I also took many lives, before and after." David's voice was tired but calm. "Cass says I am both. That everyone is both good and bad." "He is right," Lyra said. David turned to look at her. In the dim light, his scars looked deeper, his eyes darker. "Is it really that simple?" he asked. "No," Lyra admitted. "It is not simple at all. It is the hardest thing in the universe. But it is also the truth." She thought about her own brother, about the hatred she had carried for so long, about the way it had slowly been breaking apart over the past few days. "My brother would not want me to hate forever," she said quietly. "He was kind. He believed in second chances. He would have forgiven you." David's breath caught in his throat. "Would you?" he asked. Lyra considered the question carefully. It deserved a real answer. "I am trying to," she said honestly. "It is not easy. Every time I look at you, part of me still sees the enemy. But another part sees a man who's trying to be better. I think that part is winning." David looked away, back at the stars. "I do not know if I deserve forgiveness," he said. "Perhaps not," Lyra replied. "But you might earn it, bit by bit, day by day, by doing good work, by being kind, by making the choice to be better than you were before." She stood up and looked down at him. "You have 2 more days of harbor time left," she said. "What are you going to do with them?" David did not answer right away. He sat there, looking at the stars, thinking about Cass and the slave camps, about Cellar Valley and the children who died, about his wife Amy and his son Daniel. "I do not know yet," he finally said, "but I'm starting to think about it." "That is more than I could say a week ago." Lyra nodded. "That is a start," she said. She turned and walked away, leaving him alone with the stars and his thoughts. And for the first time in years, David Kim felt something other than guilt. He felt possibility. He had spent the night making final repairs to his ship. The engines sounded healthier now, their sick coughing replaced by a steady hum. The cracked housing had been patched. The navigation systems had been updated with fresh star charts. The ship was ready. But was he? David stood in the doorway of his vessel and looked out at the docking bay. The pile of black armor still sat where he had left it 5 days ago. Nobody had touched it. Nobody had moved it. It seemed smaller now. Less important. He heard footsteps and turned to see Lyra approaching. She was wearing her formal uniform, the one she wore for official business. But her expression was not formal at all. It was almost warm. "You are leaving," she said. It was not a question. "Yes. Where will you go?" David reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph. Amy's smile. Daniel's sleeping face. The little house with the green plants. "Home," he said. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. "Earth?" "Earth." David nodded. "There is a 19-year-old young man there who has never met his father. I think it is time he did. And your wife?" David looked at the photograph for a long moment. "I do not know if she will see me. I do not know if she has moved on. Maybe she has found someone else. Maybe she has built a new life without me." He tucked the photograph back into his pocket. "But she deserves to know that I am sorry," he continued. "And Daniel deserves to know that I left to protect him, even if that was the wrong choice. Even if he hates me for it." Lyra studied his face. She saw something different in his eyes now. Not happiness exactly, but something close to it. Purpose. Direction. What if they do not forgive you? She asked. David smiled sadly. Then at least I will have tried. At least I will have stopped running. He stepped down from the ship and walked toward the pile of armor. He stood over it, looking at each piece. The helmet with its dark visor. The chest plate with its burn marks. The arm guards that had protected him in 100 battles. I spent years hiding inside this, he said quietly. I told myself it was for protection. But really, it was a cage. I was so afraid of who I was underneath that I never let anyone see. He looked at Lyra. You saw, he said. Even when I did not want you to. Even when I tried to push you away. You kept looking until you found the man inside the metal. Lyra did not know what to say. She felt something strange in her chest. Something like affection mixed with sadness. What will you do with it? She asked, nodding at the armor. David considered the question. Then he knelt down and picked up the helmet. Keep it, he said, holding it out to her. Melt it down. Build something useful. A water purifier. Medical equipment. Tools for the repair bay. Lyra took the helmet. It was heavy in her hands, heavier than she expected. Or, David continued, put it somewhere people can see it. With a sign that explains what it means. What does it mean? David stood up and looked around the docking bay. He saw the traders going about their business. He saw the mechanics working on other ships. He saw children running past, laughing and chasing each other. Life. So much life. It means that strength is not about what you wear on the outside, he said. It is about having the courage to take it off. To show people who you really are. To face your past without hiding behind metal and weapons and silence. Lyra nodded slowly. She understood. I will have it mounted in the promenade, she said. With a plaque telling the story. Your story. Not just mine, David said. It is the story of everyone who has ever hidden from themselves. Everyone who has ever worn armor that they did not need. He turned and walked back to his ship. At the base of the ramp, he stopped and looked back at her. Commander Lyra, he said formally, thank you. For your hospitality. For your honesty. For giving me something I did not think I would ever have again. What is that? Hope. The word hung in the air between them. Lyra felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them away. Travel safely, David Kim, she said. May you find what you are looking for. David nodded once. Then he walked up the ramp and disappeared into his ship. A few minutes later, the engines roared to life. The old vessel lifted off the deck, turned slowly toward the exit, and flew out into the darkness of space. Lyra watched it go until it was just a small point of light among the stars. Then even that disappeared, and he was gone. Torek appeared beside her, looking confused. He's leaving without his armor, he said. That equipment is worth a fortune. Why would he abandon it? Lyra looked down at the helmet in her hands. She thought about David's words. About courage. About facing the past. About walking forward without hiding behind metal. Because he does not need it anymore, she said. Torek did not understand. That was okay. Most people would not understand, but Lyra did. And somewhere out there, flying through the stars toward Earth, David Kim understood too. 3 months later, a transport ship arrived at the station carrying a message for Commander Lyra. It was a simple note, written on paper in handwriting that was rough but careful. Commander, I found them. Amy agreed to see me. It was hard at first. She cried. I cried. We talked for hours about everything we had lost. Daniel is a good young man. Strong, kind. He has his mother's eyes. He was angry when we first met. He had a right to be angry. But we are talking now. Slowly. Carefully. I do not know what the future holds. I do not know if we will ever be a family again. But for the first time in years, I am trying. I am building instead of destroying. The armor is gone. But I am still here. Thank you for seeing me. David Lyra read the note 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. She walked to the promenade, where David's armor now stood on display behind clear glass. The plaque beneath it was simple, just a few lines. This armor was worn by a man who thought it protected him. In truth, it only trapped him. He found the courage to take it off and walk forward without hiding. Strength is not about what you wear. It is about what you choose to become. Lyra stood there for a long time, watching visitors stop to read the plaque. Some nodded. Some looked confused. Some walked away with thoughtful expressions on their faces. And far away, on a small blue planet called Earth, a father and son sat together watching the sunset, learning how to know each other for the very first time. The armor was gone, but what remained was so much more.